Hello and welcome to StudyIQ. I am your friend Rahul Saigaonkar, and today we are going to talk about the most sensational news of the day. Now, this was going to be a routine day, isn't it? Especially the people from private sector, from software, they were looking forward to this day because it's a Friday, Saturday and Sunday, weekends. They were looking forward to this day. Suddenly, a news comes up that at 9 a.m., our beloved Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to address the nation. And whenever this happens, many people have hearts in their mouths, isn't it? Because we do know that the Indian Prime Minister has a penchant for surprises. And this time also, he did not disappoint. At 9 a.m., Prime Minister Modi addressed the nation and he said, sorry. He announced the 3 farm laws, the contentious farm laws, they will be repealed in the upcoming winter session. Now, in this video, we're going to talk about this development. We are going to understand the 3 farm laws. I'm quite sure that you're already aware of it because it has been the buzz news for almost a year. Right from the laws that have been passed, we have been looking at protests, we have been looking at debates, we have been looking at arguments, counter-arguments, accusations, counter-accusations, allegations, counter-allegations. We have seen farmers being called anti-national, we have seen farmers being mowed down by cars. So this was a contentious issue for sure. It was also quite highlighted in the Western media also. We are aware of that. And suddenly the news comes today at 9 o'clock in the morning. Prime Minister says that the farm laws are going to be cancelled. So we're going to talk about these laws. We're going to understand why this is happening. We'll talk about why the decisions now. In this video, we'll also talk about the major reactions that have come after this news has been out. So let's begin our discussion and let's talk about these farm laws first. I'm quite sure that you are already aware of these. The 3 farm laws that were brought, the first one was the Farm Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation. I've written bill here, it has already become Act in September 2020 itself. The second one was the Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Bill 2020. The third one was an amendment to the Essential Commodities Act, where the government tried to deregulate the production, and the main thing was the storage, movement and sale of certain food grains, including cereals, pulses, etc. So these were the bills. In a nutshell, if I have to tell you, what was the intention of these bills? The government said that these bills are aimed towards the welfare of small and marginal farmers. What did these 3 laws tried to bring? First of all, they tried to break the monopoly of the APMCs. How? Now, the private sector was also open to buy directly from farmers. What did it allow? It allowed for farmers to get into written contracts with private entities. So in a nutshell, now the farmers were not supposed to sell their produce only in the APMCs, but they can sell it anywhere to any private entity. Apart from that, through the Essential Commodities Act amendment, the government allowed the agri-businesses and other private businesses to stock food articles. It also reduced the power of the government to arbitrarily impose restrictions on stocking and movement of these goods. So, prima facie, it looks like these laws, the acts that were brought, they were brought with good intention. It feels that, yes, they wanted to break the monopoly of APMC, and we know the problems of APMC in India. The first thing that we need to understand, in India, we do need agricultural reforms. But the question was about the intention of these, how the bills were brought. What was the core problem here? The core problem was this. As a representation, I have put the example of only one particular act, that is the Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Bill 2020. Just look at the dates, you'll understand the problem. Why? It was introduced on September 14, 2020. Before that, it was brought as an ordinance. Introduced on September 14th. In Lok Sabha, it was passed within 3 days. It was transmitted to Rajya Sabha, it was passed again in 3 days. So in 6 days, a bill which had bearing on Indian agriculture, and Indian agriculture is considered as the backbone of our economy. A bill having such bearing on important Indian sector, it was passed within 6 days. That was the core problem. Without consultation, without taking stakeholders into confidence, that was the major issue. Now, as soon as the bills were passed, we do know that the farmers' protest began. On November 26, 2020, the farmers started protest on the Haryana-Delhi border. Even today, the protests are going on. And I told you, we have been looking at the news, right? Farmers being dubbed anti-nationals, the case where farmers mowed down, the atrocities, or I would say the state violence against farmers. All these things have been highlighted many a times. But what was the issue? What was the problem with the farmers? What was the argument of the farmers? See, the farmers first of all had a fear that if APMC's powers would be reduced, then the private entities, their powers would increase. They wanted mandis to continue, and perhaps they wanted that the middlemen would be affected. To a certain extent, many cases have come about middlemen also being part of the protest, etc. But let's try to understand that they did not want APMCs to be diluted. Now, this was the first step. Apart from this, the farmers also thought this is the beginning of the end of minimum support price regime. The farmers wanted MSP to continue. Apart from this, the biggest fear is that if we are bringing private sector into the domain of agriculture, what happened here was that private entity can directly enter agriculture, they can enter into a contract with farmers and they can buy stuff from farmers. And if that happens, we need some sort of a regulation, because private companies, they can become the Frankenstein's monster in future. That was the prime fear by the farmers. And they demanded basically rolling back of the 3 farm laws. This was the basic demand, that simply roll back whatever laws you have brought without consultation with the farmers. The farmers also very stringently argued that we want guaranteed MSP. They wanted written assurance from the government that MSP will not be discontinued. Apart from that, they also demanded that the minimum support price should be recommended on the basis of MS Swaminathan Commission recommendation. Also, the farmers' organizations, they wanted the APMC or the mandi systems to be protected. They did not have a problem with the private sector emerging, private markets emerging, but they wanted mandi system to be continued. And later on, some other demands also emerged, although there is no development over this, right? Later on, some other demands came, like the withdrawal of Electricity Amendment Bill 2020, where the farmers feel that they would no longer get free electricity. Apart from that, they also demanded end of fines and jail term for those farmers for stubble burning. So this question was also raised, this demand was also raised. Now, what happened? Now, we do understand that as soon as the laws were brought, it was quite obvious it would be challenged judicially. What happened in the judiciary? The judicial deadlock came up. In January itself, the Supreme Court, it stayed the implementation of the farm laws. And here the Supreme Court tried to play the role of umpire. It mediated between the government and the farmer organizations. It asked to set up a committee where farmers would be brought and the negotiations would go on. The government tried for negotiations. The government tried to explain their side to the farmers. The farmers demanded these things. And eventually today we got the news that these farm laws would be repealed. What did Prime Minister Modi say in the address? Now, before announcing the repealing of these farm laws in the upcoming winter session, Prime Minister Modi did say that the farm laws that the government brought, they were in the interest of small and marginal farmers. He said that मैं आज देशवासियों से क्षमा मांगता हूँ, सच्चे मन से, पवित्र हृदय से कहना चाहता हूँ कि शायद हमारे तपस्या में ही कोई कमी हो गई थी, जिसकी वजह से जो सत्य प्रकाश था, यानी कि जो लॉस थे, उस लॉस को हम हमारे किसान भाइयों को नहीं समझा पाए. और आज गुरु नानक देव जी के पवित्र प्रकाश पर्व पे ये समय किसी को भी दोष देने का नहीं है, यानी कि हम फार्मर्स को दोष नहीं देते हैं एंड एक्सपेक्ट कि वो हमें भी दोष ना दें. और आज मैं आपको, पूरे देश को ये बताना चाहता हूं कि हम तीनों जो कृषि कानून है उसे वापस लेने वाले हैं आने वाले विंटर सेशन में. सो इज गोइंग टू टेक बैक द 3 farm laws in the upcoming winter session. So what is going to happen next? That's the interesting question. What next? We will see this, because the winter session is going to start on November 29. In just 10 days, we'll get to know what is going to happen with these. Although Prime Minister Modi has promised it will be repealed, let's see if there will be repeal or there will be some sort of changes or amendments. We'll have a keen eye on November 29 for sure. Apart from that, what next? In his address to nation, Prime Minister Modi also announced that a committee will be formed which will now comprise of representatives of central government, the state governments, the farmers, agriculture scientists, agriculture economists, who will basically sit together and create a policy for ensuring there is effective and transparent minimum support price and other agricultural reforms. Now, in the hindsight, I would like to say here that this should have been the first step last year. Now, you bring 3 laws, you pass them in 6 days. The first step should be to bring all the stakeholders together to get input from them to create those laws. So there is an idiom in Hindi, Der aaye durust aaye. That's the thing that is happening right now. The thing that should happen in first place, a committee would now be set up to understand or to bring the farm reforms in India, where there would be representation for other stakeholders as well. So this was announced. As I told you, we will have a keen eye on November 29. As soon as the winter session begins, we will keep updating you on StudyIQ. But let's talk about the reaction, because this was a very, very big news. It's a huge news, isn't it? Now, what was the reaction? The first reaction from the ruling party itself. The ruling party tried for face-saving measures. It's quite obvious because the government is rolling back a major agricultural reform. The Home Minister of India, Amit Shah, called it a statesman-like move. He said that we tried to explain these farm laws to the farmers. We tried to negotiate. We tried to bring certain changes which was not understood, and that's why we are repealing it. Some sections of farmers, mind you, it was said that some sections of farmers were not convinced. That means some farmers are convinced, some were not convinced, and we are bringing it because some sections they could not understand or we could not explain them properly. Now, what was the other reaction from opposition, which was very interesting? Right. Obviously, the opposition would call for a victory for farmers. You can see here, opposition leader Rahul Gandhi, he tweeted, "Desh ke annadata ne satyagrah se ahankar ka sar jhuka diya." And he also posted old video of him saying that the laws would be repealed back. Another opposition leader from TMC, Derek O'Brien, he said, "Arrogance loses from hubris onto your knees." So it was quite obvious that the ruling party would be on defensive and the opposition would be on aggressive. Farmers' victory. The question here is it a victory for farmers? Are farmers taking back their protest? That's the question. And as of now, the answer is no, because already a response has come from farm leader Rakesh Tikait, who has said that the protests will end when the farm laws are repealed in the parliament. So he also said that we'll wait till November 29 when the farm laws are repealed. The biggest question that beckons in front of us is this: why repeal now? Now, it's quite obvious that in India, the elections are a very important parameter for big decisions. There is a funny idiom in Indian politics. They say that bring the laws to win the elections and repeal the laws to win the elections again. Is it same kind of move? You can see here, Prime Minister Narendra Modi orders repeal of 3 farm laws ahead of assembly polls in 5 states. We do know that polls are due in Goa, they're due in Manipur, they are due in Uttarakhand, but they are also due in Punjab and Uttar Pradesh. And it's said that the one who controls Uttar Pradesh, they control everything in India. Not just because of population of Uttar Pradesh, but its clout in Indian political scenario. So we do know that the elections are due in Punjab and Uttar Pradesh, and this might have a bearing on those elections. BJP is gearing up for elections in UP, and in Punjab, they are looking at an opportunity, because if you look at Punjab, Congress right now is going through some sort of factionalism. There is Navjot Singh Sidhu, there is Charanjit Singh Channi, and there is Amrinder Singh. 3 factions. Amrinder Singh has announced he's going to set up his own party. Aam Aadmi Party is resurgent again in Punjab. And BJP's ally, Shiromani Akali Dal, is also there. So BJP is looking at some sort of opportunity here. In Uttar Pradesh, especially in Western Uttar Pradesh, many farmers were unhappy with these laws. Will it have a bearing on UP election? We'll let you know when the results are out. But as of now, as soon as this was announced, on social media, there was something trending, #masterstroke. And if you just check this #masterstroke, you will see that many political pundits are calling this a masterstroke by the BJP, that ahead of election this has happened. But many people have also started memes that it's a masterstroke, but it might not work. The answer to this question lies in a very important phenomena in Indian elections. Now, if you ask any psephologist in India what works, what would be the masterstroke? Because in India, the fault lines have been drawn already. It's said that every party has their own core voter base. Now, if you talk about BJP, they have their own core voters. If you talk about other opposition parties, they have their own core voters. And the so-called swing votes, that is very famous phrase in United States, it has a very close synonym in India. They call us floating voters in India. Floating voters are those who at the last moment would be persuaded to vote for any of the party. It may be the ruling party or other party. Many factors do play a role here. Anti-incumbency, caste, religion, decisions like these. So is this a master stroke? Only time will tell. Will this decision, especially of repealing the farm laws, will it bring the floating voters, and I would say the farmer floating voters, towards BJP? That would be the question we will have a keen eye on. Let's wait and watch for the great game ahead, because 2022 is a year of elections. As I told you, 5 states. Manipur, Goa, Uttarakhand, UP, Punjab are going to polls in the first half, and later on we are also looking at polls in Gujarat and Himachal Pradesh. So this is going to have a bearing on the election year 2022. Let's keep an eye on that and let's look at the updates. As and when the news comes, we will talk about it as soon as possible on StudyIQ. That is it in this particular lecture. Thank you for watching this. Jai Hind.